everyone so much for joining Origin and Maude for an event on Outercourse. I know that I personally am a huge proponent of Outercourse, both on its own and sometimes as a complement to penetrative sex. So I know it's a big part of a lot of relationships, and I think can be just really great for learning more about your body, exploring what you like, either of your own body, of your partner's body. So I'm really excited to dive in with two of our experts. And just as a quick reminder, we are recording this session. So if you want to hop back on at any point, we'll be sending this out. Did I just pause for a second? Okay, cool. Well, I'm back, but we'll share this out with attendees afterwards. So and just a reminder that this is not medical advice. So we always recommend that you speak with a provider if you have questions that we can't answer after this presentation. And I know we got a lot of questions in advance as well, so we'll kind of try to pepper some of those into the discussion, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. But just to get us going, a little bit about Origin. So I'm Allison. I lead the marketing team at Origin. We are a women's health company focused on pelvic floor and full body physical therapy for women and people with vaginal anatomy. We believe this type of care should be covered, really should be the standard of care. And so we're committed to providing this pelvic floor and whole body PT for people kind of across the country, both in person and virtually. Celeste is one of our virtual physical therapists and really stellar. And now I'll introduce a little bit about Maude. So Maude is a Latina-founded sexual wellness and intimacy company. They have an incredible vibrator that I own and use, and then also some other incredible products. I know from like lube to all sorts of things, and really are promoting kind of modern intimacy. And so I know I've seen tons of content on their site about Outercourse. So excited to have Laura joining on behalf of Maude. So a little bit about our two speakers today. From Origin, we have Dr. Celeste Compton. She is one of our virtual physical therapists practicing with us in California. Really passionate about raising the standard of care around pelvic floor health and increasing access for this type of care. And then Dr. Laura Mayhofer, who is one of Maude's advisors. She's also a pelvic floor PT. So we've got double pelvic floor trouble with us, and focuses on offering inclusive care and has a passion for creating accessible resources, education, and products for people with pelvic floor dysfunction. So I think, two experts who have spent a lot of time thinking about sex and wellness and the pelvic floor. And so I'm excited to dig into the content. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Celeste.
Okay. So here's the agenda. We're going to talk through Outercourse 101 and penetrative sex, what that actually means, what the options are. Beyond that, finding ways to make sex fun and pleasurable for everybody involved. And then if you still want to have penetrative sex and there's some barrier limiting that ability, just ways you can get around that. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers at the very end. Okay, so Outercourse. Technically, if you Googled it, it would tell you that it is sexual pleasure with non-penetrative sexual activity. So that could mean anything in terms of what brings you pleasure. But the one caveat is there's no penetration, whether vaginal or anal. And so this can be touching, massage, masturbation externally, using the vibrator, those great tools. But yeah, it's not just foreplay. It stands alone as itself. It can be used as foreplay, but by itself, it's wonderful too. So next slide. Okay, just a few reasons why you might want to try it yourself. And these are just for anybody, honestly. Like, first of all, it's helpful to know what makes you feel good, and learning about your body, taking a moment to explore the external factors that are involved with just having pleasure and even achieving orgasm. What's sensitive, what's enjoyable, what doesn't feel great. It's just a really good time to get to know yourself. And then when you're working with a partner or more partners, it's a good way to build trust and intimacy in those environments, so that you can kind of practice communicating, practice using your words and language, that everybody around you and involved with your sexual moment is informed and feels like they're on the same page. So, and also another reason is if you just don't want to have penetrative intercourse, that's totally fine. Everybody do you. And then finally, if you aren't able to enjoy penetration, or if you can just tolerate it, but it's not something you actually like, or else you can't even tolerate it, those are things that might lead you to trying Outercourse versus just the old school, penetrative sex, the old college try.
When do you all hear from your patients, or like when do you recommend Outercourse for your patients, or where are you hearing that it's like, most enjoyable for them?
Laura, you could jump in first if you want.
Thank you. So I find that a lot of times patients are actually wanting to figure out ways to revisit it, maybe because they're having some pelvic pain, or maybe they are post baby, or they've had some hormonal shifts and they're like, gosh, I used to be able to we had our sort of like favorite hits that we would cycle through. And now it seems that those favorite hits aren't as accessible because maybe they have a kiddo running around, maybe they're caring for an aging parent. And so this is when it's really nice to be able to see and revisit, I call it your sexual menu, to see what are those things on there that are going to bring you the trust, the intimacy, that's going to help you learn about your body. So it seems to be when there's some sort of change, hormonal change, life change, things like that, that this comes into play.
And to jump on that, I also have seen a generational shift. I don't know if you've noticed this too, Laura, but I feel, and I'm so impressed and so, I don't know, proud of younger generations that are actually just like taking a moment to explore on their own before they enter, a sexual relationship with somebody in a way that they're not prepared to do yet. And I think totally agree with Laura with the first half of like people who are, trying to relearn their body after some major change in their life, but also just people who are just entering sexual intimacy with a partner and trying to just do it the right way. And there's no wrong way, but you know what I mean? Try
Yes.
something different and a little bit more sex positive.
Yes.
Oh yeah. So yeah, penetrative sex is not the only sex. Surprise, who knew? The main thing is there is a lot of pressure for penetrative sex. There's a lot of social media, television, movies, everything kind of points towards this culmination of penetrative sex that is just made up, and I think being able to be confident in knowing yourself and your body and what feels good for you is the first step to then being confident and saying, you know what, I don't really care for that. That's not for me. It's not something, the rest of the menu looks fantastic. I don't need fish. I've tried fish or I've never tried fish, but, just being confident in that decision, but then also using that as a really good excuse to try some different things and explore different areas like nipple stimulation, clitoral stimulation, pelvic floor involvement, considering your feet, your face, your abdomen, your ears. These are all areas that a lot of research kind of points to when you have an orgasm, there's these different muscle groups that contract involuntarily in that process. And a lot of these line up with that. So there's a close connection between these different muscle groups that probably hasn't been investigated nearly enough, honestly, but something worth exploring on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Laura, you were talking about your menu. Like, how do you think about what that looks like or how do you describe that?
So I actually, I have an email sign up where I give like a list so you can go through and it gives you the language around a menu to kind of start expanding your knowledge. I'll share that on my Instagram so people can grab that if they want. But I like to take some of the like very obvious like breasts, chests, nipples, vulva, if we kind of take that off and then see where else do you enjoy being touched and how do you like enjoying being touched. So for example, I always throw my poor partner underneath the bus. He's totally okay with it. But I prefer like if you were to rub my back or rub my arm, I prefer a very deep kind of firm, constant pressure. If I do that to him, he's like, ouch, that hurts, ouch. And he prefers like this very light tickle. And so it's been really interesting just taking that very simple thing as it pertains to your arms, your legs, your thighs, your back, your tummy. How might that feel differently? And it's been super enjoyable. And I always share this with patients, with you guys, to be able to give yourself some permission to see, like, if I'm touching him, can I touch kind of for my own pleasure, and what areas might feel and like sense differently, you know, if I focus on temperature, texture, pressure. And then conversely, same for him. If I'm touching him, how might this feel different? So there are certain spots, again, I talk about my partner, on his body that I know are ticklish. And so if you were to like lightly touch my feet, I might accidentally just kick you right in the face. Again, that deeper pressure for me is going to feel better. So, again, if you sort of take the very kind of obvious zones out, even if you think, oh, when I get a massage, where do I like to be touched? And I've, again, thought about this deeply for myself, and I like am in love with forearms and hands, and then my feet. And so I've been able to kind of bring that into our sexual experience. And it's like, oh, when you think about it differently, instead of focusing on that penetration piece, there are so many other areas of our body that are really lovely. Another example might be when I go to get my hair done, like when you go to
oh my
when they
God.
like wash my hair, it could just be like, can I just have you like, wash, just like, And so I feel like that very Harry Met Sally moment in the cafe. And so again,
we know the moment.
Yes, that's another thing where it's like, you can really think, how can things be incorporated differently, and how can you have these micro moments for areas of exploration? So my boyfriend and I might be able to do a micro moment where he like massages my head in the morning while I'm like brushing my teeth, and it can give us that experience and that sensuality, that intimacy that Dr. Compton was talking about earlier. So those are ways that I tell people, think of other experiences that you've really enjoyed, that physical touch, and then how can you bring that in with your partner?
I love that. And I really love the idea of taking something off the table to kind of not force, but like it encourages you to look at what else is on the table. And I really love that. And then here's just a fun fact: 18% of people, women with vaginal anatomy, can orgasm with just penetration alone. That's such a small number. 18%.
Right, it's not what's modeled to us at all.
At all. They tell us like 100%. And so we're the strange ones if that doesn't happen for us, you know? And that's not the case at all. So we just need to reframe this altogether. And the clitoris is so valuable. It's so important. It's so special. And for this study, actually, it talks about 36% of women actually needed it for orgasm during intercourse, but there's a whole other slew of women who just enjoyed intercourse more with it. So this is just putting that out there, that it's not, the number isn't 36 alone. Just put that out there. And then these other ways to orgasm. And Laura, I'll let you kind of take over and jump into some different tools and things that you've seen and worked with.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah. So going through kind of these different things. And again, Dr. Compton was saying this, the clitoris is so amazing. And I forgot my 3D clitoris model. So I'm going to do some hand gestures. But basically your clitoris is kind of like this upside down V. And if you have my like really big gold ring, you can think of that as the head of the clitoris, and it comes up and attaches onto your pubic bone. So if you touch underneath your belly button, walk your hands down until you run into that hard bone, that's your pubic bone. And then you have the legs of the clitoris. They actually go down the sides, kind of by your inner thigh. And then you have the bulbs of the clitoris that are really on either side of that vaginal opening. And so what is so beautiful about this is that the clitoris has erectile tissues. So when we're thinking of leveraging different toys or doing dry humping, mutual masturbation, any of these things, what we can start to think about is how can we incorporate that entire area of the vagina instead of just thinking of that little nub that we see externally. So it's fun whether you use like Maude toys where they have like the drop, which is kind of this little egg, or the Vibe, which is larger and kind of like a cone shape, is either one of those or any different kind of external toys out there. Instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to put this right on my, like where I see the clitoris, maybe I put it on my pubic bone. Maybe I put it on my inner thigh. And then as my partner is exploring these different areas, it's going to get more activation of those nerves and really get all 8,000 nerve endings of the clitoris, because it's not just the little part we see. So when we look at these different ways to orgasm and different ways to incorporate things, you could use a toy externally as maybe your partner is massaging your inner thighs, and that's going to get those side parts of the clitoris involved. And I love the statistic about the 18% of women being able to climax only with that vaginal penetration, because really that means 80% are orgasming through what's called clitoral assist. So again, the more things we can incorporate, the better. And it can be so fun to figure out. I always tell people, like, think of when you were in maybe high school, and maybe I was a little racy for high school, but like high school and college where you're just like making out. I just want to bring that moment back. Like that's what I live for.
Yeah, that energy, that like excitement. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, can either of you talk about edging? I know that I know it was like something that I only learned about like since working in pelvic health, and I think it's a super valuable kind of tool.
Yeah, I mean, it's the concept of edging, for anybody who's unfamiliar, is that you are approaching orgasm, but you don't go there. You kind of get to the edge of it, and then you bring yourself slightly away from it, and then you work your way back in. And so what you're doing is you're starting to change your threshold of first of all, you're enjoying those moments, the sensory input, that stimulation for much longer periods than just an orgasm, right? And then the principle is, the more you can kind of start to tease and get, let's say you're almost there and then you back off, and then let's say you kind of almost have to start over-ish, not completely, but like let's say you take it down to 30%, you do it again, and you go past that level you just got to, and then you bring it back again, and then you go past that, and then so by the time you actually allow yourself to orgasm after several rounds of just like backing off when you're almost there, the idea is that at the end it is that much more satisfying, that much more intense, that much more enjoyable for you and all parties involved. So I don't know if Laura, you're going to jump in on that at all, but that's kind of
no, you hit the nail on the head.
The clitoral head, you might say.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so on that note, let's talk about making sex more fun, more pleasurable. Have fun with this. This is when you take certain things off of the table, replace it, right? So to Laura's point before of like talking about those different sensational, like sensory inputs, whether you're using something cold or warm or a little bit hot like fire, or if you're using something that's more rough and a little bit sticky or oily or just wet, or just like different surfaces, different textures, different tools that might just help trigger a different sensory response. And what's nice about your nervous system is it's very adaptable. So just one of the earlier questions that we received was if somebody was having trouble with actually having good sensory input and good feedback. And this is a really good tool to tackle that, so that if you feel like you're not like getting as much as you could out of something, if someone's working around your nipple and you're just like, doesn't do anything for me, or someone's like working around your neck and you're just like, I don't feel anything, this is a good tool that you can use with somebody, but also on your own, to just kind of practice trying to experience different sensations. Close your eyes, turn the lights off, take away other sensory input, so that all you're really doing is feeling what's happening on your body in different parts of your body, and bring back that mindful connection. Take your breathing into it. Take your, feel your muscles as they contract under like the chill of an ice cube, and feel them relax as you have, a warm hot pack under your neck, or, feel what's happening in your body, and just kind of bring it back to something a little bit more fun and just that feels good, and see what works for you. So Laura, I don't know if you want to jump in on that at all, but
yeah. And I think what I love is you highlighted how to get all of these things that feel good, and also see what might be the barriers that are having it not feel good. So like you were saying, oh, maybe I'm doing something to my nipple and I'm not really feeling it. Maybe you might notice, gosh, I'm doing this and my feet are really cold. Throw on some socks. A lot of people have difficulty orgasming because their feet are cold. It's like, I can't quote the study, but I know I've read it. And so again, finding these things, are you nervous someone's going to come like in, do you have little kids? Do you have parents staying with you? Whatever. Do you need to change out the handle for a door lock? So it's great because when you're practicing on setting the stage, you can see maybe like for me, I sometimes don't want to be fully undressed. Maybe I want to wear a cami to get some support to my chest. Again, figuring out what makes you most comfortable, so then you can more fully explore, and then you can really see this is on the menu or not on the menu is so great. And I did want to really highlight the lighting too. I think finding the right lighting, like there are so many great, I have like an essential oil diffuser that has different color settings, the dimmable lights, sometimes kind of like I have some window shears on where I can kind of crack my window. So there's more light in there than maybe what I thought I enjoyed when I was in my early 20s. Being able to revisit these things again and again and change is so wonderful, because maybe you're like, gosh, I have always been having sex with the lights off. Now I want to try with the lights on or slightly on, and I want to be blindfolded. Lovely. Get a satin blindfold in there, So things like that can really change over time. And again, because I'm in the Midwest and I have seasons, like winter time is sock sexy time. That's how we know we keep the socks on. Okay.
That's
so
amazing.
so those are things again that I've started to learn more and more with people, is as you're setting the stage, you can find what could be a hindrance and you can get rid of it.
And I know,
go
ahead.
Good. You can go.
I was just gonna say, I think, I know I love like this emphasis on exploration and on sort of, trying new things and learning. I know we had one question that was like, any tips for like couples with small children who like have short windows of time? Because what we've described, it's like this luxurious, you have hours to experiment. And like, honestly, that sounds great. I'm like single and without kids, and I'm like, check. But how would you think about this maybe for someone with less time?
Yeah. Well, I loved Laura's idea before of kind of finding what type of touch feels special and monopolizing on that, so that, she's brushing her teeth and someone can come behind her and just like place their hands at the base of her neck, around her ears, and just like having that moment. It's not, full on like doing something in the corner and like bringing out the candles and whatever else, but it's something. I think, I don't know, Laura, if you want to jump in, but I feel like you can go first.
Yeah. So I always tell people, if we can really narrow down what it is that you like and makes you feel special. So again, my example with my boyfriend and I is that I kept trying to do this like deep pressure to him, and he was like irritated, and he kept trying to do like light tickle pressure. And it was like, why is this not working? And so I think for people with small kids, it's really, taking a moment to ask your partner, like, what is it that you find sexy, like without judgment, just no judgment. What is it that you find sexy? How do you like to be touched? And then like really like listening and taking note of what that is, and then being able to do that. So like I love to grab my boyfriend's butt. You guys are getting all of my nitty gritty, but again, it's like, okay, so then like I know when that's like acceptable for him and not acceptable. If we're out in public, he doesn't want me doing that. If we're in the safety of our home, he does. So though I don't have any children, but we don't have a ton of time together, we can maximize those little moments. So then when you have like 15, 20 minutes, when maybe the kids go to bed, then it's like you've sort of had this foreplay all day long, this outer course all day long. So then when it's time and you choose to maybe have penetration or do mutual masturbation, things can kind of go quicker because you've been having sexy moments or islands of sexiness throughout the day.
I love that islands of sexiness throughout the day, because there are going to be days where you have those islands and then you never get to actually have you never actually visit Maui. You know, you're just like, I'm all the way through here, and I never actually get to go do that. So having those moments and appreciating those moments versus kind of making them this like building up the pressure. I think sometimes there's so much pressure when you finally have those 15 minutes and you're on the couch, you just collapse and you're like, oh, we should probably have sex. Like, it's been a long time. And, so I think it's so loaded, right? Like the actual, like trying to be intimate and trying to have these connective moments, but then also meeting this desire to also have an orgasm, and then sometimes you can do both. And sometimes you're like, maybe right now I could just do one or the other. And so I think, like to Laura's point, like communicating, finding out what you feel is important and when, and the appropriate time and space, and then respecting that your partner might not have the same, and just talking through it is so important. And I think we could all use practice just with that.
Yes.
Okay. And then knowing so it's on that point of like building up your ability to communicate effectively, start practicing putting words to what you're feeling and what you enjoy and what you like, because nobody can read your mind. And so if you are trying to involve somebody in these moments, it only works if you can be completely honest and if they can be honest with you. And it's hard when you've been in a relationship for a long time with somebody and you have small kids or different things, or even if you don't have kids and you've just been together for 15 years. It can feel really daunting to be like, actually, I don't like when you do this. And they've been doing it for 15 years, and so that can be scary and feel like you're breaching trust or like you've lied to them, and they can feel that way, or you can feel that way if they say something to you that you've been doing for 15 years that you thought they liked. Try not to take it personally. Try to make it about them and about, like separate the two as much as you can. It's easier said than done, obviously, but that's it. Communication matters. Laura, you can.
Yes. And I think also I encourage people to find words for things like outside of the bedroom. So I always say we practice how we play. And what I mean by that, I was an athletic trainer, so excuse those sports analogies, but like if I'm get out of the shower and I put on lotion, what does it's just me and I'm putting on lotion. Okay. What just in my head, I'll be like, okay, how would I describe this? And is this soft, hard, silky, smooth? Do I feel like more arm hair, roughness, or whatever? And so I'll practice in these random situations. And I encourage people to practice, like if you're eating a salad, what textures might you feel? What, just again, kind of practicing in situations where it's not the actual situation helps expand the vocabulary. So I am kind of a word nerd. So I might, again, I don't judge me too hard, but I might like look up, sometimes I have a hard time because I have my go-to words. So I would like look up like synonyms of like, what else could this be? And what does this, like, what does it elicit? Like how else could you describe warm, and I make it a little bit of a mindful exercise for myself, but it really doesn't need to take longer than say 30 seconds to a couple of minutes just to be mindful about what that is. And then, or what even smells you're smelling, and just go ahead and find the words for that. I also like to encourage people to do like a noticing walk where you're focusing on all 5 of your sensations and then seeing how might I describe the things that I'm seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, whatever. So again, just taking it out of the bedroom, practicing it, so then you can bring it into those moments and feel more confident.
I love that.
Yeah.
I also wanted to bring up, I don't know if in physical therapy, I often with someone in person when we're in a session, I'll really challenge them to use their words and use descriptors and talk through what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, what's going on. And it's a really good chance if you have a pelvic floor physical therapist to practice speaking up and communicating with somebody who's, not your partner, not nobody that matters, right? They're just your doctor. So I feel like, to Laura's point of just like finding other scenarios where that are maybe not completely tied, maybe they're close, maybe not, maybe even do the same thing in a different, like go to a restaurant and just like start talking to the waiter in a way that's like maybe more descriptive than needs to be, but you're never going to see them again. So
Yeah, I've often found that when I ask partners what they're into, people have a really hard time describing it. I think we just aren't like conditioned to think about it honestly or to explore a lot. So I think practicing it is really, really important.
Yeah, we're not taught. We're just,
Yeah.
And again, back to like social everything. When you watch TV, nobody's having a conversation before they have sex for the first time of like, what feels good? Does this feel good? How do you feel? Like it's never happening. It's just something some people just know. But here's some good tools that are just options for when it is hard to find the words, to get the ball rolling, to get people talking, to get people thinking.
Yeah, so this orgasm order form from School is really amazing because it gives you kind of like a printout at the end. And so it's great because if you don't want to describe it to someone, you can just like hand it to them and just be like, here you go. And so again, it can take some of that like, ooh, I'm a little bit nervous about, talking about this. And I also like it because your menu can change. So like we were saying earlier, if you have like little kiddos running around, you might be like, oh, okay, when I filled this out pre-kid, like I think I filled this thing out, for years. And I wish I would have saved them as I filled them out because it's really changed as I've aged and as I've been in different life scenarios. So this is something that I love giving as homework. I'm giving to all of you as homework to go through and do because again, I'm like, wow, all of these words that I didn't even think about,
Oh, I love it. Okay, this is important. Not all people enjoy penetrative sex, and that's okay. And tolerance is not the same thing as enjoying it. You can tolerate anything in theory, but we want you to enjoy it. So if you want to enjoy or tolerate or get to a point where you can have and try out penetrative sex, and there are barriers limiting that ability, it's important that you have a team of people helping you to address that, because there are mental and emotional barriers and there are physical barriers, and they're equally important. If you have a sprained ankle, it doesn't matter if your glutes are the strongest in the world, you can't go for that run. So this kind of applies in the same way, sort of. But there's all sorts of things that can contribute to it. Like I mentioned before, sex in itself is just so loaded. A history of trauma, social norms, shame that might be associated with it, just what we've been brought up individually in our own life. If there's just this world, specifically America has a very puritanical culture, I want to say. And then physically, there's so much that goes into actually having sex and penetration and orgasm. So if your muscles are limiting you, as in the case of vaginismus, if your skin or tissue might limit you because of rawness or irritation, if your joints don't actually allow it, like if you had hip surgery and you can't go past a certain amount of hip flexion and suddenly you're like, I don't know how to have sex anymore because we only did this one position for my whole life. Or if your hormones shift, to Laura's point before about just entering menopause, or if you are taking a new drug prescription and that interferes with your libido, those are all things that can play a part. And so it's important to take a look at yourself and your life and your situation and your relationship currently, to see if there's certain barriers that you can address and who's the right team to do that.
Yes.
And that's where this slide comes in. So often when you're working towards penetrative sex, if that's a goal of yours, you're likely going to have a team of sex therapists, physical therapists, and your physician, obstetrician, gynecologist, whoever your primary care provider is, at least. The more the merrier when it comes to this. You want to have support. And if you'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So
yeah, and to just highlight on this page, and when we say team-based approach, and what I wanted to highlight on the last page too, is a lot of times you might go to your primary care provider, and maybe some of you have already heard this, where you say, hey, I think something's not right. And they might tell you, have a glass of wine. It's just stress. Use more lube. It will get better with time. All of those things, if you or anyone you know is having difficulty, please send them to one of us so that they can start to see that any discomfort, even if it's mental discomfort or if it's physical discomfort, there are people that can help you. And rarely is it just medication, and it's absolutely never like a glass of wine. So, but I mean, I love wine. I'm not judging, but I'm just saying, like, really just like let this soak in. And to all of you amazing people here today who listen to this in the future, you are our boots on the ground that help us really change lives, because we want sex to be enjoyable. We want people to have orgasms. And a lot of times your first person you go to is the physician, NP or PA. And sometimes, even though they mean well, they can discredit you, but we believe you and we're here for you.
Love it.
Okay. Now I think we can get into questions. So I know we had a couple of questions in advance, so I can just start with those. But if you have any for people that are tuning in, please drop them in the chat. So I know we had one that was around kind of having pain with sex due to vaginismus, was married for years now, and wants more options if it's possible. I guess, what would you sort of recommend for them to kind of try first, knowing that they are having pain with penetration?
You can jump in first if you want, and I can.
Okay, thank you.
I saw you like itching to get in there.
I know, I'm like inching here. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. So some things that I think are great is first, get really, really good at diaphragmatic breathing. So when you inhale, your diaphragm comes down, it gently expands your pelvic floor. When you exhale, diaphragm comes up, pelvic floor comes up. So when you do that, say you do it 2 to 3 times a day for 5 minutes, again, it's starting to give your body some islands of rest and some motion and mobility there. And then you can bring that into your time with your partner. And maybe you incorporate some nice massage oils or different lubes. So when you're doing the breathing with the massage oil and the lubes, maybe some vibrators, that all of that stuff is going to help down regulate your system, which allows for more muscle relaxation and better blood flow to that area. So those would be my tips to kind of help expand what you can do when you're together with your partner, but then kind of help yourself prime the pump outside of that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I really like this because to your point of muscle activation and overactivation with that, and having these moments of rest and pause and intentional like lengthening, I also encourage practicing different positions, because there are certain positions where your muscles are just like like if you're on top of somebody and you're just like nervous about it and you're just like teetering and you can't balance on your heels and your calves are too tight and you're just like going to fall over, that's not a good position to relax. Like your muscles are going to tense up in response to that. So it's finding a position that makes you feel comfortable, lets you turn muscles off, is really important. I really encourage people to try side lying with your partner behind you at times, because that's a position where you can turn off and your glutes are there and they can just squeeze your partner away from you whenever you want. You know, you can be like, I'm going to just move you, like I can inch forward, versus like if you're in the missionary position where you feel trapped and you feel stuck, that's a lot harder to feel relaxed too. So feeling like you have some control, but not so much control that you can't let your muscles relax. So practice different positions. If you're using dilators, practice dilators in different positions too, just to see which ones are good for you to actually feel comfortable. Yeah.
Awesome. We had another question just around how can I stop dreading all types of sex? I don't like porn. What are alternatives? So are there any things that you recommend to your patients just to either physically or like tools or resources to kind of get more potentially like in the mood or excited?
I can jump in for a second. I read this book. I'm sure a lot of you have read this book. It's amazing. It's wonderful. It's called Come As You Are. It's written by a sex therapist, Dr. Emily Nagoski, and so great. And this one chapter at the very end, she challenges you to imagine what would your best sex life look like. If you could imagine it right now, what does it look like? And I really love that exercise, and I encourage everybody to take a moment to do that. It might not be what you think. It might not be at all what you thought it would be. Like maybe you imagined one thing, but then as you start to dive into this, maybe this PowerPoint presentation just triggered something else and made you think, oh, actually, I would love a sex life that allowed me to do this or would provide this. Porn doesn't necessarily mimic what you want. It's mimicking what some director came up with, that's not you. So if you find the perfect porn that speaks to you, great. If you find the perfect sexual experience that works for you with a certain partner, great. But until that day, just take a minute and imagine what you want and then find a way to get there. And that's where a team of sex therapists, sex coach, physical therapists, people can all help support you in that journey. But Laura, I'll let you jump in too.
I love how you said that. I call that like it's reverse engineering. So you kind of see where do you want to be, and then you can reverse engineer it. I have found in the last like 2 years, I think it's been so cool. They have like you can read. So I'm not a huge like porn person either. I'm always like, what are the biomechanics of that? Like I'm such a dork, and I'm like, where are the optimal angles? So it's a little bit challenging for me when I have like something visually in my face. But there are great things. I might be pronouncing this wrong. Dipsia, so DIP.
Yeah, Dipsy.
Yeah, okay, Dipsy.
Yeah, they're great.
And so it's like basically I think of it as like podcasts, but it's like erotica, and so you could listen to it. So for me, that's a little bit better because then my mind can create its own picture, and that can be a lot sexier. Reading, sometimes I don't want to read a whole book, and so there's short stories that you can access that you can read, which can be really beautiful and cool. And again, what I love is that they're starting to really make these things where, say you prefer same-sex situations, say you prefer hearing it in a female voice, like listening in a female voice, say a male voice, like whatever it is, you can start to find things that are what you like. The other thing I'll say about these sexual situations that I've really noticed coming out is different, like there's, I'm not saying alien porn, even though I know that's just what came out of my mouth, but like other things that are not like phallic. So don't look like a penis. Like I like the Maude things where it's like, oh, this could be something that could go internally, but it doesn't look like a penis. But there are a lot of things that kind of look like alien-esque to me, or like sea creature-esque. And I've had a lot of patients who prefer interacting and engaging with those things because it's not like sex in your face, And so that's the other thing that I think, give yourself permission to look at some of these different things, and you might be like, oh, hey, that thing looks like a octopus tentacle, not so scary. Or I found this one thing, the NBENBY, that looks like a bicycle seat, and you can like grind on it. Hey, okay, I like that better versus like a straight up vibe.
I love that. It is so cool how many things are coming out right now. And yeah, back in the day, it was books. Yeah, yeah. Like remember romance novels? That's like it's still a thing. That was a thing for a reason. So anyway, putting that back out there.
Awesome. We have a question around someone who wants to have penetrative sex, but has some challenges with their partner's penis feeling too large. And so, you know, how to kind of navigate that, or, you know, either approach it in a way that can maybe allow them both to kind of get what they want, or, you know, but avoid obviously pain. They said they also tried the ONUT, but it didn't work.
Yeah, so basically think of your pelvic floor as a 3D spider web. So there are 26 muscles, they attach behind the front of your pubic bone, and then they run like a sling or a hammock into your tailbone and the bottom part of your spine, known as your sacrum. And even though a lot of pictures depict the pelvic floor like this one glommed on layer of muscles, it's actually like this sort of 3D spider web, and then my straw is the vagina going through there. So these muscles that kind of go at a bunch of different angles to create support and like continence and all of that, when you're trying to have intercourse, they need to stretch, expand, and they need to be able to be pressed on. So the ONUT, for people who don't know, is great because it's like a bumper. So if I have my penis here and I put this ONUT on, it only lets like half of the penis go in, or half of the dilator or vibrator or whatever go in. But, which is great if you're having like pain with deeper thrusting. But if you're having pain with that initial penetration, or maybe you're the penis or vibrator or dildo size is too large, it doesn't help that stretching. So I prefer to utilize dilators, which are things that start out like small, like the size of my pinky, and then size 2 is about the size of my pointer finger, and then size 3. So they increase in circumference and length. And there's a bunch of different brands out there, but you can use those to kind of slowly over time, gradually stretch those tissues so that you can accommodate whatever you're trying to accommodate. So whether you need to have a pelvic exam, we can work on that. Or if you want a penis or a certain vibrator or a certain dildo, you can utilize the dilators to get there.
I will say,
I recommend doing it with a PT.
Yeah, I think getting started with PT is always a really good idea. Obviously, we're biased, but the one caveat I want to add is I've had a lot of patients whose the dilators aren't big enough sometimes. Like the partner's size goes beyond that, and that's where, if let's say you can tolerate all the dilators and you get to that point, you're like, all right, this is still like, this is easy. If my partner was just like a half an inch smaller, it'd be fine. Then you're going to go into the realm of trying to find a toy or an item at you go to a sex shop and you try to find something that mimics your partner's size, if that's your goal. And I just want to piggyback on Laura's point that, you know, I have a lot of patients who are like, oh, but if I can, you know, if I get my muscles to be able to stretch that amount, like I want my vagina to be tight, and all these different, like, you know, terms that I hear. And I compare it to like learning how to do a split. If you know how to do a split, you're not walking around with your legs just out all the time, right? Like your muscles can keep you where they are. They stay where they are most of the time. But when you need to, they have the ability to stretch completely and go as far into that split as you need. I can't do a split, but if I wanted to, I could start today and slowly over time and practicing every day and getting more and more length in my muscles and flexibility and tolerance to that stretch. Eventually I could do a split. And that's how the dilators work. It's this gradual ability to be able to tolerate a stretch that you need, not every day, not all the time, but you need to be able to get to that point. And it's just a slow process. So don't give up on the dilators. Don't give up on the ONUT either. If you can, like, bring it back out and, you know, keep trying, but just, I know, I just want to say, don't give up. It just feels frustrating sometimes when you're in it.
And
definitely
you're like, reach out to PT if you're running into a problem, because they're like Dr. Compton was saying, there are so many options for how we can get you there.
Mm-hmm.
Great. A couple other questions coming in. Do I have any other medical options to treat vaginismus? I've been through sex therapy and pelvic floor therapy and I've had no success. My partner is still unable to insert a finger fully after a year of therapy.
Yes, there are other options. There can be like, you can do Botox. People have done like vaginal Valium, CBD with THC, suppositories. I will say, there are a lot of folks who I have talked to, and I do remote consultations with, where I ask them what was their course of care, and it is not all encompassing. So I would recommend, even though you went to PT, I would still maybe have your program audited by another PT, because we're not all created equal. And so like, my bread and butter is like pain with intercourse and pain and vaginismus. And so I oftentimes have a different perspective than some other PTs.
Yeah, I think that's completely on point. Everybody is different, like she said, and you tried one, you didn't try them all, and just keep trying, because you're going to find the right person who you connect with, who understands, who's experienced in what you're dealing with. And a lot of times we want to help, and so sometimes somebody who might not be qualified or is experienced might say like, yeah, I can help, I can do this, let's try it. And I just don't want that to turn you away from actually succeeding.
Yeah.
So yeah, try again, please.
Awesome. And another question around, will dilators work with vaginal atrophy, or any other suggestions there?
You can go ahead, Dr.
Yeah. With vaginal atrophy, there's a couple different things happening. So sometimes if it's tied to like hormonal shifts, it can also include a additional dryness, maybe the tissue is a little bit less nourished, less lubricated. So there could be other things compounding with that vaginal atrophy. Usually you'll find it as people age, and that's kind of a term that's just thrown out that I think is a catch-all a little bit. But I think if you work with a physical therapist who can kind of actually take an assessment and be like, are your muscles actually atrophied, or are there other things going on? And nothing against OBs, but I think sometimes their focus is your reproductive organs and your reproductive system, and they're not as aware of your musculoskeletal system as it relates to that. It's just not their wheelhouse. That's not what they do. It's like going to see a dentist and having them not fully understand how your jaw muscles work. It's not exactly what they do every day. So seeing a physical therapist to actually confirm what your muscles capabilities are is first important, because then they can give you a tailored approach and be like, oh yeah, dilators are really beneficial because actually your muscles are not atrophied. They're just hypersensitive and reacting in a really contracted position when they don't need to be. So it could be a number of things. So, but if you really truly have vaginal atrophy, then I would say see a physical therapist, because they can give you a better plan of action than maybe dilators.
Yeah. And also if it's vaginal atrophy in the setting of like menopause, that's where we come back to that one slide that I highlighted, where you have NPPA, MD, and then PT and sex therapist. So sometimes with vaginal atrophy, we need to make sure the skin is optimized. So we might need estrogen, cream or whatever, or even just moisturizers. So we need to make sure the skin is happy. I've even had to have some people go to dermatologists specifically for their vaginal tissues. Then PTs can help with like all the other tools. And then even sometimes, again, with aging, there can be just less hormones. So then you might have to go through like some other ways to work on being more receptive to intercourse and things like that. So that's where that team-based approach and have each person rule in, rule out the problems is helpful.
Awesome. Okay.
Very
and
cool.
I think maybe time for one more question. So we have a patient who is having random spotting with penetration, has gone to pelvic floor PT, and could it be because they don't use lube, or maybe not enough lube, and they are 7 months post hysterectomy?
Mm-hmm. So I think with the 7 months post hysterectomy, I would wonder about the vaginal tissues just on the daily. So think of your vaginal tissues like literally exactly like your mouth. So my labia are my lips, right? And then inside, like this cheek stuff, okay, is like a mucosa. That's what's in your vagina. And so sometimes after a hysterectomy, even if your ovaries are spared, or if they're not, if they're taken, that tissue, the mucosa inside goes from looking like the cells look like a plump grape to more of a wrinkly raisin. And so just in life, just like your mouth can sometimes get kind of dry and parched and it can get thinned, then when you have intercourse, you can have that random spotting or just random spotting whenever. So adding in some type of daily vaginal moisturizer takes the more raisin thin tissue, plumps it up to a grape. So I would do daily moisturizer or like every other day at least. And then I would incorporate lube into sexual activity. And I personally like to have one of each kind of lube, because if I am using I'm a huge fan of toys. A lot of my toys are silicone based. And so you can't use silicone lube with a silicone toy, and nothing like kills my mood more than if I reach into my bedside table and I don't have my smattering of options. So I recommend just getting like a hybrid lube, a water-based lube, a silicone lube, and just have it there. And then you can just, whatever you're feeling, you can use.
I love that. I should do that.
Especially with the travel sizes. That's my like trick.
Right.
Like I just get the little travel sizes and I just have that there. I have a couple of different types of moisturizers in by my bedside table. I've just got tubes of goodies all over, just like people care about skincare for their face. I swear to God, my vagina is like, I just turned 37 and it probably looks like 23. Now my face, I can't remember
You
to put
get that all the time.
I know I can't remember to put SPF on my darn face every morning, but you better believe kitten is ready. So